Welcome to the Grief Dreams podcast. My name is Sean Ram alongside Dr. Joshua Black. It's a beautiful day here in the Niagara region. Hamilton, Ontario is, yeah, sure, that's still Niagara.
I guess so. So if people don't know, this is also Canada.
Yeah. Yes, you are listening to a Canadian podcast. And again, we are happy to welcome everybody from around the world. We get a lot of listeners from around the globe, Asia, Australia, Africa, America, Latin America. All right, that's enough. Okay.
We know what the countries in the world.
You're aware of different places. But happy to have all of you here. And we get to do another amazing podcast with a very interesting guest. Her name is Lauren Kane-Lysak, and she is a pet taxidermist, mortician, artist, and animal lover. After high school, she worked in a funeral home where she found that the corporate nature and lack of creativity opportunity left her drained. She became interested in taxidermy after meeting a bird taxidermist in real life while volunteering at the San Bernardino County Museum. Lauren has made it her goal to work with pets and preserve their tangible memory for eternity. And she has a website and Instagram, and we'll share those at the end. Lauren, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Hi, Lauren. Well, it's great to finally talk to you. I'm so excited about this podcast just because I have no idea what you really do. You know, like it was one of those things that has always been like distant from me in my life, and only through doing the podcast and started talking about, you know, death and dying with people does these different things in life pop up. Like we had a person on that did memorial jewelry from pet hair and bones. I was like, oh man, that's so interesting. It really got me thinking. And so when I saw your Instagram, I was like, wow. And so I reached out to you, and I'm glad you're able to come on and talk all about your journey into this really, I think, mysterious field. And then also the questions you get too, because I'm guessing there's a ton of questions out there that you answer repeatedly because it's not something you normally talk about with friends and family. So I guess the first question I have is, so after high school, you went to a funeral home. Was that like designed? Was it like something you wanted to do, was to work in a funeral home? Or was it just like a job you had because you needed money?
It was something that I wanted to do. So in high school, we had a career day. And so they have, you know, hairstylists and police officers, firemen, lots of like typically normal jobs come in, and they have, you know, like an hour spot in each class to talk about their occupation. And I saw that on the list, way at the bottom was a mortician from a local funeral home. And it just immediately piqued my interest. I was super excited to attend that. I actually went to 2 meetings that same day, just so I can listen to the second one again, and met the people that I'd be working at the funeral home through there, actually. So it was just kind of a kismet thing, and it worked out. And I started working there shortly after graduating high school. But as you said, I quickly realized that it might not be the correct field for me.
Were you like the only one interested in the mortician, or were there other students that also, you know, it struck a passion in them?
There were a lot of kids that showed up to that meeting, but I think it was mostly out of the shock value. I think people were just like, ooh, see this creepy thing. Like people weren't really taking it seriously. There were a few. Actually, I got hired with one other student from my class, and he worked in the funeral home for quite a while, a lot longer than I did.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of when I was in high school, I probably wouldn't have went there. Like, you know, like it's not something that I even knew anything really about with death or grief or anything like that. So, you know, it's amazing what strikes us and what hits a chord in us, and we follow that, and then we see where it goes. And you said like it went to a place that it wasn't totally satisfying. And so you needed to find a new path. So was it difficult finding a new path because it's like, I can only imagine, I just really finished graduating. So I've been a student for most of my life. So, but when you switch fields, or when something that a goal that you thought was going to achieve something doesn't, was it hard to change, or did life just take you like really smoothly out of there into the next profession?
At first, I think it kind of was because I had this idea in my head that that's what I was going to do. That I was once I graduated high school, I was going to go to Cypress College, which is in Southern California. It's the only college in California that teaches mortuary science. So I was really planning on going there. I'd attended a few of the open houses and was really on the straight and narrow, had a plan to go there after community college. And it just didn't work out that way. But I feel like even going and working at the funeral home and getting that experience and learning that wasn't what I wanted to do was really integral to building what I have today and shaping, what I didn't want a funeral home to be and what I would want for my own loved ones. So I think it was really integral that I went through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I firmly believe in that, especially with young people who are getting into careers, is kind of trying. I think it's good to try things out and see what sticks and what you like and or don't
Yeah.
like about something. What was it that you liked about it? And what was something that you didn't like?
I loved working with the grieving families. Just any kind of way that if I could bring just one smile to their face or get them some kind of comfort, I would go home just beaming. That was huge. But most of the time I was stuck in the office, answering a lot of phone calls. And I was encouraged by management to upsell and try to get people to, pay for bigger funerals and more services that maybe they didn't need. And that was just something that never sat well with me, and I was never able to do that. So it's just that corporate selling everything, every death is a sale, that really rubbed me the wrong way.
I could see that. Yeah, I could see it taking away from the fulfillment of the job, from the main purpose, and
Yeah.
from the joy of it as well. Because you get joy, like you said, out of and fulfillment out of the contact with the family and making them feel better. And really, that's what I would want out of someone who worked in that field. But yeah, like everything else in life, money and corporations and marketing kind of ruin things,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
you kind of have to now appease the business side of it. But
Yeah.
it seems like you were more interested in kind of like the hands-on interaction and actual job itself, which I
Yeah.
think is great. And it seems like you've carried that forward into what you've went on and did next. What was the next step for you?
Well, after that, there was kind of an interim where I was thinking about going into psychology, going into counseling, and then I've always loved art. It's just something that I've always loved to do, and it just comes out of me. I have like a need to make things. So, finding taxidermy was kind of a perfect melding of all of my interests. I say like I've married all of my passions. Death care being one, animals being another, and art. And I feel like that is taxidermy. All of those things are integral to the process, especially when you're dealing with pets. In traditional taxidermy, where you're doing a lot of trophy mounting, things like that, there isn't that emotional side to the work. It's just very much, get the animal looking as best as it can, and it's going to be on a wall for a hunter to show the amazing catch that he or she hunted. But it doesn't have an emotional connection to the past like a pet taxidermy would.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see if someone, and that's also traditional, the trophy mounts and people who hunt and getting, animals or head stuffed and whatnot. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I could see that not being as much of a connection for those individuals. Like if you're a hunter and let's say you kill a moose, because we have moose
Mm-hmm.
here, meese
Yeah.
here in Canada. We have mooses. And, okay, you're proud, you go out and you hunt a moose. Yeah, there might be a momentary connection or whatever as you
Yeah.
kind of do your job and kill the animal, whatnot. And then, okay, you want to bring it home as a trophy and help remind you of your trip and whatnot. Great. But
Mm-hmm.
that's obviously very different than having a relationship with an animal, cat or a dog or
Yeah.
whatever, guinea pig, and having you come and, go through your process and then having it memorialized.
Yeah. And
I
that's
could
not
see
to
that. Yeah, very
undermine,
different.
like a hunter's process. Like I don't want to say that all hunting is bad. I think, some hunting is good, and depredation efforts where there are, some species that are out of control, and, farmers need to protect their harvest. So they're having to trap certain animals and things like that. And some, in that case, some forms of hunting are sometimes necessary to just to sustain the types of living that we do, which again, that also has some ethical pushback. So it's really tricky. Talking about animals and taxidermy, what we do with them after their death, is really tricky because they don't have consent.
Yeah, absolutely. And politics aside, it's one of those things where it can get a little bit confusing because, taxidermy is not so much in the public sphere, if you will, anymore. So there's probably a lot of misconceptions about it on the whole, and obviously we'll get you to fill us in on some of those. But yeah, walk us through how you got into it, and what was the driving factor.
Sure. So the driving factor was really meeting a bird taxidermist in real life and seeing, oh my gosh, this is something that's accessible, something I can learn. Here's a real person in flesh and blood that's done it and is telling me how to do it. So that was very inspiring. And so she kind of just recommended that I get a book, any kind of book on taxidermy, and just start studying. And so that's what I did. I got a book on Amazon or eBay. I think it was like a used, super old book from the 80s on taxidermy. And I just started studying and collecting all the tools that it listed in the book. So I'd start going to craft stores and picking up a thing here, picking up a thing there, until I had a taxidermy kit. And once I had all my tools together, I decided it was time to then look for a specimen. First bird, I got a parakeet from a local pet shop, and I felt very weird calling around these pet stores and asking if they had dead animals to give to a learning taxidermist. But I was able to get over that pretty quick and was able to find a parakeet that had just passed away overnight. And I went the next day to go pick it up and brought it home and kind of sat with it for a few days before I gained the courage to actually work on it. I remember having it in the freezer and taking it out and kind of holding it and thinking to myself that this is the first time I've ever held a dead thing of any kind, or had a real connection with death. And I kind of had to train myself to think, this is okay, this is safe, this bird can't harm me, and to go from there. Because I've always had this terrible, terrible fear of dying and anxiety of death. And I can go more into that later about my Oma passing and how I was never around for her hospice care or the time that she died, and I didn't see her ever again. And we were really close. And I think that left some kind of mark on me and possibly what I'd be doing in the future.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more, because I think a lot of people probably have that fear of dying, or just a fear of death itself. And so how did working with, well, first of all, how did you find working in the funeral home first? Because that's the last place I would go to if I had a fear of dying. But then also, how did you get over that fear working with the animals? Because you said, it's not like a school you're doing this by yourself with your own time and energy. So how did you work through that? Because I think that's special that you were even able to work through that on your own.
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. I think it was just the curiosity and just the wonder, and I had to do it. But once I did, once I made that first incision, and the first time I did taxidermy, I was actually in my Opa's garage. Opa is German for grandpa, in case those don't know. And he was the only one in my family that was kind of supportive and open to letting me practice in his garage. Because even though it was like a tiny little parakeet, it just freaked out my whole family and all my friends. So, but he was the only one that was cool enough to open up his garage, and he had a work desk in there, and set up all my tools. and that's where I did my first bird. And once I opened it up for the first time, I was really worried that I was going to get grossed out or have some kind of adverse reaction to seeing, I don't know, the inside of this bird. But it was extremely therapeutic, and I had never felt so calm in my life. And I think that's what really kept me stuck to this, to wanting to learn taxidermy more, was how serene it was, and seeing that it's okay. It's whatever's on the inside is exactly what we're made of on the outside, and it's not quite so different.
Wow, that's interesting. So just facing the fear was enough to, I guess, let it dissipate just by doing that
At
and
least,
realizing.
yeah, at least in that case, like I still feel like I'm working through my death anxiety. It's still something that I always think I have cancer, or I'm having a heart attack. So it's something I deal with all the time, and even working with death on a daily basis. I think it's helped me to become more calm about it, and I'm trying to just become a little more graceful about the thought that one day I will die, and that's okay. And I just attended a living funeral ceremony. Have you guys heard about that?
Yeah, I think so. It's where you kind of want to celebrate someone's life before they die.
It's
I
sort
think.
of. A living funeral ceremony is where there are the people that decide to participate, and I was one of those people. And the facilitator has set up little memorial booths, if you will, with each person's photo and the date they were born and the day that they so-called died. And we were asked to write a goodbye letter to ourselves and to our family members and friends, and kind of led through a death meditation afterwards of we laid down and shrouds were placed over our bodies. Weighted pillows were pressed onto our eyes, and it kind of mimicked this feeling of being buried or being in a womb or something.
Wow.
And we come out of it, the facilitator says, "Oh, you're feeling the warmth return to your fingertips and your toes, and you start moving again." And it's like this rebirth. And we all came out of this with immense gratitude and joy and just like pure love. And it was amazing to see the way that the whole mood of the room had shifted.
Wow, that's a really cool exercise. I think
Yes.
I could see the usefulness of it, because I've heard of and I've done myself kind of meditations that kind of do visualizations and visualize yourself dying and in a casket, and even getting into details of, okay, picture worms, eating your flesh and whatnot. But I mean, the point of it, kind of graphic, but the point of it is to put your thoughts, and then ultimately hopefully you can kind of transfer that to your body into that state. And then once you're dwelling in that state, you can kind of focus on those ideas, which is think about
Mm-hmm.
your life or think about your family, and it really puts things into perspective. And it's just a
Yes.
visualization to kind of do that. But this is even more, it's immersive, if you will. Like doing all these
Yeah.
motions and sights and sounds and having them play into it. Wow, I can really. So what was it like for you, let's say an hour after that?
Oh, it was awesome. I felt elated. And I went to lunch with a death doula
Mm.
afterwards. So we were just talking about just more stuff in regards to death care, and we're shooting ideas back and forth. So it was a really great group of people. And the person that puts it on, her living funeral ceremonies, her name is Emily Cross, and she's in a band called Cross Record. They were just doing a big tour, so I was super, super grateful to get to attend that.
Yeah, I would. That's the kind of feeling that I got when I did the meditation itself. But it's one of those things where you just kind of you don't care as much about the little things that bothered us before, because you've kind
No,
of dwelled. You were emerged in a state of thinking about your death and then higher
yeah.
things like love and gratitude. And then you can go out and someone messes up your coffee order, and okay, whatever,
Oh no,
right?
no, nothing mattered.
Crazy.
The traffic didn't matter. The bad mimosa didn't matter. It was fine. Everything was fine.
Wow, so interesting. I gotta say, you you like to do different things than most people. And I think that's kind of cool because, right, there's different, we all have different fears and different worries and different things. It's like, how can we figure those out and to live a better, more peaceful life? And you're doing some of that stuff. And I got to commend you for that, because some people will just hide away from that. But as much as you have this anxiety and this fear, you're not really so afraid that you're not willing to find or try to find an answer to that, to reduce that in a way. And I think there's something about that. You have a lot of courage. And I think that's the biggest thing. You have courage in doing that. And you have a courage to pursue a career, as you said, when most people would think you're crazy or they disapprove of you, and you still go after it anyways. And so there's, as much as you're an artist too, like there is something in you that really beats by its own drum. And I like that, because those people are rare in our society. So I want to get back to you to your journey on how you so you did this the parakeet. How did that turn out at the end once you went through that?
It was not so bad. I had a few
but
issues.
Not so good. Okay.
No, it did look like a bird, which was good. It looked kind of like a bird, and it didn't rot. And that was my goal. I thought to myself, if this thing doesn't start to smell weird or go bad, then I've succeeded. At least I've, preserved it. So that was kind of, I was setting my standards pretty low, but also just being realistic that most, first taxidermy projects don't come out like we want them to. And, my mentor, the first person that was talking to me about bird taxidermy, she said that her first 15 birds just didn't look like birds at all. So it was encouraging. At least it kind of looked like a bird. And I had to glue the tail back on and all this horrible stuff.
15, just a flock of Frankensteins.
Yes. But they always get better. It's like with each animal, you learn something different. There's a different curveball thrown at you, and you take that with you to your next experience. To get better and better. So how long? I've been doing this for about 9 years, and I'm still learning every day. Yeah,
well, I took a quick peek at your Instagram page, and it seems like you've developed into a real pro.
Thank you.
From my amateur ability to spot a pro, but yeah, that's very interesting and again fascinating. What are some of the interesting animals that you've done?
Oh gosh, let's see. One of the most interesting that I've seen anatomically are any kind of smushed face animal. Like they call it brachycephalic when the face is flat. Oh, you do have one?
Yeah, I have an old English bulldog. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, they have the most interesting anatomy, especially in the bone structure. So a lot of times, I've gotten a Persian cat that had this great smushed face, and her owner was super, super kind and was really curious to see also what she looked like underneath the skin. And this was kind of part of her grieving process, was that she wanted to be a part of her cat's second journey in this part of his life or her life. And I had skinned the cat, which you have to do in taxidermy, and it reveals all the muscle structure underneath the skin. And she wanted to see the photos. So I took photos of that, and it's just this alien-looking creature. You just can't even imagine what these guys look like without the fluff. It's just crazy. But also, they still have their personality. And so when I sent her this photo with discretion, she was just overcome with joy, and so glad that she had the opportunity to see that. But what other animals? Anything that's hairless is really weird to work with. I've taxidermied a few hairless rats. So in that case, you actually have to resculpt all the wrinkles because they don't really do it themselves.
Oh, okay.
You have to rearrange the skin back onto a form to create these wrinkles again, and even resculpt the wrinkles and put the skin back over each wrinkle.
So the fur can hide that. You don't have to do that with the fur.
Yes, okay. Exactly. So things that are hairless are a lot more complicated. And then you'll have to, since the skin discolors a lot, we have to repaint and repigment all the skin. So that's also a challenge. And they're really, really interesting. I think any of the, Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and what are the reactions when you present a person with their animal?
Usually tears of joy, lots of gratitude. It's really, really special to see. I always encourage people, if they can, if they want to pick their pet up here at our home. That's what I recommend, because I have a private viewing space in the back that I've set up as kind of just a really sacred space, a beautiful little funeral parlor where we can lay out an animal when it arrives, so people have more time to say goodbye, or at the time of the reunion. It's just a nice place for them to see it. And then it's kind of selfish of me, but I like to see their reactions and know that they're happy with what the product came out to be. It's hard sometimes when I'm, sending a pet back, across the country, and it's like, I have no idea if they're going to like this thing or not. And, you just hope that it meets their expectations, because there's so many expectations to meet.
Yeah. It's an odd concept for some people to think about it, but I guess you could, you have to imagine that if for a person or, who owns a pet or has a pet in their life, and then the pet goes away, and let's say they're really connected and attached to the pet, they love that pet a lot.
Mm-hmm.
This is a way that those people can memorialize their pet and kind of have them remember them in their life by being in their home as a being in a stuffed version of themselves. Obviously it's
Yeah.
not the same thing, and it's not not going to bring back your animal, but I think
No.
just like human ways of remembering the dead, and look, we have to also remember, like, it wasn't very long ago that we were doing that, and there are some cultures that it's respected to kind of embalm or have a version of the dead relative kind of stay a little bit for a couple months in an embalmed form to kind of
Mm-hmm.
remember them that way. But even we just go back in human history. This is not an ancient thing. I think it's just in recent times it's a little bit odd for some people because it's not very common.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I like to tell people to prepare them to manage their expectations also as to what they're going to be receiving back, because the pet isn't going to feel the same, isn't going to look quite the same, because the soul is gone. And there are changes that happen with taxidermy, like the body won't be soft and pliable and squishy anymore. It's going to be rigid, unless we do a soft mount, which is where when the animal is floppy and literally like a stuffed animal. So I've done that a few times for people. But I like to tell people that what I can do best is preserve the house that housed the soul. So I can preserve that home, but I can't put the soul back. And that was what really made your pet, special. So as long as people understand that, I think that they're usually very, very pleased with what they receive.
This is a good time to talk about some of the misconceptions about the industry, if you will, or the craft
Mm-hmm.
of taxidermy. Could you walk us through some of those, and maybe also on the tail end of that, maybe an experience that didn't go so well for some people?
Sure. Well, let's see. Misconceptions are that taxidermy is just an embalmed animal. Like, we just pump it full of chemicals and prop it up and it dries like that. That's totally not the case. We're having to actually remove all the skin from the animal and then build a custom form that the preserved skin will be placed over at the end. So we're really having to rebuild the pet from the ground up. So even sometimes I'll take the leg bones, clean them all down, and then I'll actually resculpt muscle structure onto those bones as a scaffolding. And then the preserved skin is put back over that, so that I try to keep as much of the pet intact and original as possible. And sometimes the bones can help us give more of a reference for that rebuilding. And that's something that they used to do in the Victorian times. They would use the actual skull in the taxidermy. The whole skeleton sometimes would be rearticulated and sculpted over. I don't do completely all of that, but I do take some methods from the Victorian tradition and apply those to my work. What else is a misconception? That's the big one. I think a lot of people just think that it's a lot easier than it is.
Yeah, I didn't know though that it was that thorough of a process.
Yeah. Even the tanning process is complicated, which is sometimes even a separate profession in itself. A lot of taxidermists won't do the tanning at home, which is tanning is when you're turning a skin into or a fur into leather. And that's what is put back onto the taxidermy. So some taxidermists, I do some tanning at home, and then I send other stuff out to a tannery. So if it's like a really big, thick hide, they have machinery and such that I don't have, that they'll be able to get a much softer, nicer fur back. So sometimes I'll outsource things like that. But mostly everything I do from my home.
Wow, it's so interesting. I'm curious, has anything changed from, because you were trained from the 1980s book, has anything changed now with all the technology?
Not a whole lot. Just recently, though, there's been some papers coming out on taxidermists using 3D printing as the new technology so you could actually take your specimen, put it into the scanner, and it scans the exact dimensions and size and shape of the animal, and it'll spit out a perfect form. That's amazing to me. I mean, I would love to have that. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, I could see that being where that way you just put the skin over top of that form. That'd be interesting if someone didn't want the whole process.
Yeah. But then it kind of hurts my feelings in a way, because it's taking away that artistry that goes into it. Because
machines are taking our jobs.
Yes, exactly. We're having to sculpt and paint and measure. It's just, and then a machine comes along and it's just boop boop boop, it's done. So that's kind of disheartening.
Yeah. I mean, now that you said that, I could see that there's a more hands-on approach to kind of what you're doing, because it's more intimate, and look, if I was getting my best friend animal stuffed, I'd want someone who's doing it, who's taking the time to do it, rather than pressing a couple buttons and pushing out a 3D skeleton.
Plus, the other pet preservation technology that's come about, I think it came about in the 80s also, is freeze dry technology. So that's when you can put your pet into this freeze dryer almost as is. I believe they remove the organs and the eyes, and that's it. And the eyes are replaced with a glass eye, but the rest of the pet is completely your own. So that's all the muscle structure, all the fat is left in, the brain is even left inside. So that's a really interesting other technology that's come out, and a lot of people prefer that method over traditional taxidermy just because it's a little less invasive.
And does it still look the same and last as long, or no?
That's what we don't really know. It does sometimes look about the same. I've seen bad taxidermy and I've seen bad freeze dry, so it can go wrong in either case. I think it just depends on the person that's handling the preservation.
That's really interesting about the bad taxidermy, because I look at all your stuff and it's so good, and I'm like, of course they're gonna love it, right? You really take the time, but I can't imagine someone giving up their pet to sort of be stuffed and then to get back something that's really bad and horrifying like that. What would that you can only imagine what that would do to their grief and their own journey through that. Because is it possible to redo something after, or no?
It is possible. It can be really difficult just depending on the type of preservation it was. It just would really depend. Like with mammal taxidermy, we put something called hide paste underneath the skin, and that's what really gives us the opportunity to taxi or move the skin over the body. Taxidermy literally translates to movement of skin, or to move skin, or arrange skin. And so that's really what we're doing. And the hide paste allows us to really maneuver the skin over the body. It would feel almost like it feels if you're touching your arm and kind of feeling your skin move around on your arm and your hand. that's how it would feel if we had the hide paste under the skin. And once that dries, it's fixed. So that's the trouble is, taking apart something that's been fixed and dried and all put back together again.
So it's like a tattoo almost in a sense, and like it's hard to basically
Yeah.
redo a bad tattoo.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're really trusting that person, and you have one shot. That's wild. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
for,
I know.
that's
Yeah. Yeah. So the pressure is something that, I've had to learn to deal with, and I'm still learning to deal with it, and how to manage it and make sure that I'm taking care of myself and not overstressing. And that's been a huge challenge.
Well, I'd say like as you get better and as more and more people compliment you, it gets easier. But when you're starting out, it's tough. It's really tough to realize that you're good. I think just in life and a lot of things. Even like I have doubts, even though I've done like a PhD, I have doubts that, like I know things as well as people think I do and stuff, right? And it's just like, no, like you've gone to like at the extreme, but yet you still have these doubts inside that make you question, how good you actually are in an area. So for you, it's been 9 years. When did you actually make it a business? So how long have you been in business doing this?
I made it a business, not too long afterwards, in 2012. And I was going to school for art. And that's when around the time I started going to school for art is when I also started taking up taxidermy. And so in art school, it was like I was going to school for painting. So all my critiques and, projects were, painting or sculpting. But my professors were really supportive about letting me incorporate taxidermy into those pieces. So a lot of my work still involves taxidermy and art and melding those two things together.
And I think too, your eye for detail, because you have to do that with art, probably gives you that upper edge when it comes to doing taxidermy that maybe some people don't have.
I think taxidermy is 100% an art. Every taxidermist will tell you that, and every taxidermist is an animal lover. You have to have a real deep respect and love for the natural world to dedicate your life, basically, to bringing them back. It's a life's calling and a life's work. I don't think I'll ever get to a point where I feel like I'm a master,
Yeah, that just reminded me of like how you guys were talking about combining art. I remember there was a story I read of this gentleman. I'm not sure what his field was, but he would collect roadside rodents like mice who had kind of died on the road and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would create these dioramas with them acting, and he would have costumes with them and all these really cool pictures. It was amazing. And that's where I didn't really know that was a thing, but it was really cool. He collected all these mice, and then he, in his house, he had them set up in different like doll houses and whatnot. But it was fascinating.
Sounds like Walter Potter, maybe.
Oh, okay, maybe.
Victorian taxidermist. He did anthropomorphic taxidermy, which is where you dress them up in little clothes, and there's a whole wedding scene with kittens.
Oh, okay, maybe, yeah.
30, yeah, about 20 to 30 kittens having a wedding. There's like a schoolhouse with toads and another schoolhouse with bunnies.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, he was a huge inspiration for me too, just seeing his work. That's kind of how I started, was just doing a lot of little fun taxidermy pieces. I used to do tons of mice and tons of rats because they were readily available. I could get them deceased already at the pet store where they passed away. So, I had connections with all the local pet shops, and when they would have a few guys ready, they would call me and I'd come pick them up. So I wanted to keep it as ethical as possible also, by only using animals that had passed away naturally in the stores.
You must have a really eclectic friend circle. Just,
Oh, yes.
Pet store owners and hunters and, and people call you up in odd hours of the night.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Lauren, I got a big one.
Yeah. So that's how I started. And then in 2012, I met the owner of Necromance, she owns this natural history and oddity shop in Hollywood. And I kind of just approached her and showed her my work. And she was the first one who encouraged me to, oh my gosh, you need to like sell this stuff. You need to make a living doing this. And so I thought, oh, I guess maybe I could. So I made her a bunch of small pieces to put in her store, some rabbits and mice, hamsters, things like that. And also some jewelry. I used to make like little necklaces with baby mice and things like that. And they all sold out. So I kept making more and kind of entered the art world in that way and did a few gallery shows. But still just wasn't feeling fulfilled. And it wasn't until I started, when people asked me to do their pets and when I was working on the pets, that I felt that deep sense of fulfillment that I was really looking for.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, you can see where your heart's at, right? It's not about the money. It's really about helping others through a difficult time with the gifts that you have. I'm curious because, Sean brought a really interesting point, and you guys talked about it, about the making animals in unrealistic positions with clothes and stuff. Have you ever had someone do that with a beloved pet, or is it always in a realistic position?
That's a good question. I think overall, I think they've all been, people want them in a sleeping pose, usually something gentler on the eye, not something so jarring maybe as like their pet in like a pirate outfit or something. So I'm trying to think if I've ever done anything like that. I don't think I have. I think everything that I've returned has been pretty like solemn and peaceful looking. The one, I did get a request from a woman that wanted her cat to be made into a lamp, but the lamp was supposed to, I guess would be the body of the cat would be the stand of the lamp. And then she wanted the cat to be in this like pirouetting position with a tutu and then the light like at the top. So, I mean, I've gotten requests, but that one never came through. But, people have ideas.
And then where do people put them? Do they put it like in their bedroom? Because I'm curious about, because a lot of people have like a shrine, or for their loved one, it's on the mantle. Like I'm curious because sometimes it's a big animal. Where do they actually would they keep the animal when it's done?
Usually they'll start creating a special place in their home, start preparing. So when I'll get like a cat or something, sometimes people will tell me, oh, I already have a spot picked out on the mantle, or the spot picked out in the corner of the living room, or a lot of people put them back in their favorite spots. So like lots of cats and dogs have like a favorite chair or couch, and they'll end up just placing them back right wherever they were, so that they can continue that life.
One last question I have with this. I have so many questions. Another question is, if an animal dies, I think you posted on your Instagram, and there's other animals that are part of the family, is that weird for that animal, like the animals that didn't die, to see their friend stuffed?
From what I've heard, no. I've actually, lots of people have told me that, they're worried about presenting the deceased pet back into the family, but people have been really surprised at the calmness. The living pets will oftentimes come up to the taxidermy or the bones that have been cleaned, and they'll kind of even greet them with recognition, or like, oh, you're home. And people say that like their home just feels whole again once their preserved pet or the bones or whatever preservation has come back home.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's a great question.
Yeah.
I wonder about that. And, people say, and I have a dog as well, like we talked about, but I think the positioning of the dog and all that, it just relates to how they were in life. Because like, when you wake up, you see your dog or cat or animal in a certain position. When you hear it walking, that it's going to go to somewhere else. You're watching TV and it always sits in the same spot. I'm trying to think, what would I want if I was to get my dog?
Yeah.
What would I want? I want him sleeping. And that's a nice restful kind of thing.
Yeah. I like
or
sleeping
I could go opposite and go like, he's about to like bark or he's growling at something, and then just position him by the door and then see if he can protect us.
Yes. there's so many different ways, and everybody has their a specific thing that they want. Some people are really specific about, they want like the whole pelt returned, so they want the whole fur and skin leatherized and just returned as is, like a floppy skin. And then some people say they want that, but they don't want the tail included, or they don't want the face included. So, or some people just want the paws. Some people just want the skull. It's really interesting to see what people want. It varies so much, and what some people will cross. Some people will draw the line at taxidermy, but bones are totally okay. Or some people will cross the line at bones, and taxidermy is okay. So
Yeah,
weird.
our last guest said she'd want the bones, and I thought that was interesting. And that's what you're saying. Some people just want the bones.
Yeah. A lot of people just want the bones.
Huh. That's interesting. And another quick question is, so we do this with animals. Why don't we do it with humans? Is there a specific reason for it, or is it just that the culture hasn't got there yet? Or
I think it's a cultural thing. I think, we're just not there yet. But working with humans is something that I've kind of dreamt about. If I ever got the opportunity to clean a human skull for someone's family, I think I would love to do that. I feel like that's the next frontier, kind of, because I haven't worked on anything human before. But I don't see too much of a difference in keeping something like that. Some people might think that's creepy, but cultures all around the world keep their family members' whole bodies in their homes for many, many years, and that's normal. And people collect human bones and human skulls, but we don't know who they are, which is kind of unethical. We don't know how these bones came into a collection. But, your mom's skull, if she wills it to you, I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because we had someone on the podcast, Brian Lehman, and he went to, I think, Indonesia, yeah, and they raise the dead every year, clean it and everything. And I'm like, why? So why can't they just keep it, like, rather than bury it? Why can't they just actually taxidermy it, I guess, and just keep it there in the house, like for life? And I think it's interesting. I wonder if we're ever going to get there as a society for that to be okay.
Yeah, I do too. I really do wonder. I unfortunately, I feel like it won't happen. I just feel like the world is just going head first into technology and more into the internet, and I just don't see, unfortunately, like the tangible stuff of life being important, which is so sad. The realness is not.
I totally get that, but there is a movement. I think there's a movement towards people and communities and individuals who are reviving some of those old crafts, what have you. I mean, like, it's not that different than someone who's learning how to make knives again in the old classical way, or what are those things called, those people that are in those hammers and they hammer down metal. Yeah, something like that, like a smith, a blacksmith, right? Like a lot of those crafts, and I'm not saying that it's obviously the same as what you're doing, but these are traditional, older type of things we did maybe 100 years ago, 50 years ago, that people are reviving because we appreciate the craft work again. So I don't think it's necessarily going to die off. And again, it's still happening in our collective memory as a whole. Like Joshua reminded me of when I was visiting this church monastery, and they practice the old Orthodox Eastern Christian way of religion, and they have I've never seen it, but they showed me some relics that they had, of which is essentially old saints, or people of that, I guess, caliber. They've collected things like even like little bones in their fingers and their hands. They've collected and they honor those and they share those, and people come and they pray and they worship. But like, that's not that far off from us, from like today. I mean,
no, yeah, but I wonder if it's ever going to get to the full.
Yeah. I'll ask my mom if she wants me to have her skull.
And so that's something that could happen, right? You could gift your bones to. Oh,
it can happen. I don't. Like, this is something that I want for my body. I would love to be skeletonized and articulated and kept with, my dog's skeleton, like in a, private ossuary, so that, I can always be there with her. Like, that's my dream. my afterlife dream. Um, and there are services. There's a service called Skulls Unlimited. They run like a huge undertaking. They're in, I think, Texas or somewhere. I'm so sorry, I'm not sure exactly where, but they're in the middle of the country somewhere. But they have a huge company where they process bones, and they have a program where you can donate your skeleton, and they'll clean and articulate human skeletons for families.
Wow. The more I talk to people, the more I learn about all the different ways we mourn and the ways we want to remember. So yeah, it's so cool. That's so cool. And so I'm curious now about losses. Have you ever lost a pet yourself, or because I know you have some dogs, right? Have you ever lost a pet, or
I've lost many, but not like a big pet. I've lost, I had my hairless rat, Lottie. I got her in 2012, and I only had her for about a year. But she was like the first mammal pet that I had in a while, since like childhood, that I really connected to. And when she died, it was huge. And I didn't think that, losing, they call them like pocket pets. Sometimes they're referred to even as disposable pets, because they're, seen as they have smaller lifespans, and people don't give them the same amount of veterinary care or things like that. But she taught me just about the souls of animals, and that she had one, and we had this connection. She would always sit on my shoulder, and she would clean me, and it was just so precious. And she just was a huge inspiration to everything that we're doing. And I have my 3 dogs now. My oldest one, Leica, she just turned 10, and she's a whippet. And I'm already planning on, what we're going to do with her. I have a whole plan in place where if she passes away, I'm going to run and get her a private freezer, keep her in there until I'm ready to work on her myself. It's going to be a huge job, and I don't know how it's going to be emotionally yet for me. But I've been slowly kind of just mentally preparing myself for that.
Wow. You're right. Like, that's interesting. But I think you're well prepared, and you give yourself the freedom to work on it when you can. It's the first person we had on the podcast that had a pet rat. So what's it like having a rat? I have no idea.
They're awesome. I always recommend, like, if you're in an apartment or a student that doesn't have time for a bigger cat, like a cat or a dog, that rats are an amazing alternative pet. They act just like a dog or a cat. They can learn their name. They can learn tricks. They're super affectionate. They have huge personalities. Each one is so different. So they're just really cool. The only thing that's not cool about them is that they do have a very short lifespan. Around the hairless rat's only 1.5 to 2 years, and a hairy normal rat would be about 2 to 3 years.
Wow. And so do you keep them in the cage, or do you let them free like any other animal, like a dog or cat?
Most people keep them in a small to large cage. Like, the bigger the cage, the better, because they do like to move around and play. And then we used to let them out. Like, whenever we were home, we would open up the cage and kind of corral an area in the living room off so that they could just have free range. So it was just really fun to see, like, what kind of antics they'd get into. They're like little acrobats, and it's really funny. Just a little soulmate. I didn't really teach her to do anything. And she was an older rat when I got her. She'd already had like 2 litters, and she was already 1 year old when I got her. So I just wanted her to have like a relaxing retirement.
Nice. Yeah. And so I guess, is there any other kind of losses you had along the way?
Knock on wood, so far haven't had any big losses, but I know they're coming. My Opa has pretty severe dementia, and he used to love going to Trader Joe's. And do you guys have Trader Joe's up there?
Not yet. I wish we did.
It's amazing. Yeah. Well, he loves Trader Joe's, and the last time he was there, he was having a hard time, just finishing walking around the store. And the checker that knows him really well and my mom, both started crying. I think that was the last time that he was going to be at Trader Joe's shopping on his own. So it's hard, and it's getting there, and we were really close. So like I said, he was the one that was really supportive in letting me learn taxidermy in his garage. So, and they're coming. I know there are losses that are imminent. So I'm just kind of doing my best to prepare for those and taking care of myself along the way.
Do you think your career has helped you come to terms with loss, and also helped you find ways to continue those bonds after the person has died, and also helped you remember them?
I think so. But I do wonder how it'll be different for a human loss because I'm not,
Mm.
I'm not able to take my Opa's skull, even though maybe I wish I could. But, that would be frowned upon, unfortunately. Yeah. And I kind of feel like he has a pre-plan at a funeral home, like a really traditional funeral home. And I feel like when he passes, that I'm going to want to call them up and be like, hey, like, let me do this. It's my grandpa. Like, leave him alone.
Mm.
I feel like those feelings are going to bubble up. So I'm not really sure how to deal with that yet because this is what I do for a living, and I, work with other like human morticians and death doulas and green funeral directors. And from all the things I've learned, I feel like I'm going to want to get involved. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to or not.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. And that's something we've talked to people about, is the healing process, and also what it can give you in terms of getting involved in the actual funeral process itself. Like, for instance, washing the body, or
Yeah.
Even just sitting and watching them do their job, or having a say into, like, well, what the actual funeral, or what the person's wearing, and all this can really, if the person wants to do that, can really add something to their healing and grieving. Obviously, if you don't want to do that, that's okay too. You don't have to if you're not comfortable.
Yeah. But I feel like that's what I missed with the loss of my Oma. She got sick. She had congestive heart failure. And the last 2 months of her life, I don't think I saw her. And that was because she, insisted she didn't want her grandchildren seeing her that way. And she didn't want us to remember her like that. But at the same time, now, after, learning what I know now, I kind of wish that I had seen her and got to hold her hand and say goodbye, because I didn't get to do that.
Yeah, I think times have changed in the sense of what we know just through research and how to facilitate grief, processing a little bit more, and anticipatory grief and all that. And it's like, once we're aware of it, and I think it should be the child's choice on if they're wanting to or not. Because some children would say, no, I don't want to see, Oma. But you'd be the one that would say yes. It's just part of who you are, that you're okay with the dying process. But yeah, like, I remember when my mom was in the hospital, she didn't want anyone to see her in the hospital, because she wasn't, looking the best. And I think that's just also part of our neuroses, in the sense of feeling that we need to be the best, or look appropriate for people to love us. I think the best love is those people who, when we wake up in the morning and we haven't showered, and they still look at us with the same way. And I think there's something beautiful about that, and be able to trust people that, they're going to see you in the best way possible.
Yeah. I guess I wish she would have thought of us like that, and knew that we wouldn't judge her or have any kind of ill feeling to how she looked. It's so superficial and silly, like, looking back at it,
Right. And so I'm curious, have you ever had a dream of her or Lottie?
Yes.
Capital L.
I've had lots of dreams of my Oma, like, calling on the phone. I've never seen her in a dream, which is weird. I don't think I've seen her. She's called on the phone in dreams, though.
Oh, really? Is it like a cell phone she's calling on, or is it like a landline?
It's like like old school landline with like a cord to the wall.
Whoa, that's wild.
Which is something, I wasn't even raised with that. Like, we had a cordless phone, and my Oma and Opa, they did have a wall phone like that. I don't even know what you call it, a wall phone. But that's when I've dreamt of her, she's calling from a phone like that, and she always sounds fine. and happy. And then I kind of, it's like I have this, like a feeling that she's okay, but she's also very distant. Like she's somewhere else in the dream.
That's so interesting. And do you guys talk about like what's going on in your life, or do you remember the conversations at all?
I don't remember the conversations. I wish I could. I need to get better at writing my dreams down. That's something I want to start doing more of, so that I can get better at, recalling these things.
Yeah, I wonder what you've talked about. That's so interesting. I wonder what you said, right?
Yeah.
Do
I
you
just remember the phone.
Do you remember how you felt after?
Peaceful. I guess just knowing that she is okay. Because I always got the impression that she was okay. It wasn't like she was calling frantic, or it was always her, just as calm, just as collected. But the notion in my head was, oh, you're not on Earth. You're very far away. You're calling from somewhere else.
Wow, that's so interesting. I wonder if that phone dreams are, I think, more rare than anything. So I wonder if that's
really.
Yeah. It's that's why I was really excited when you said that. I was like, because there's a couple. I've only seen, I think, one phone dream, like in all the thousands of dreams I've seen and heard. So it's very interesting. So if you're always having this, that's so intriguing to me, because I wonder if it's part of the way that, like, not seeing the death or not seeing her, if that affected that.
That's interesting that you say that, because, well, when she passed away, I got a phone call from my mom, even though we lived in Redlands, California, and my Oma and Opa also, they moved to Redlands, and, I was in the same town that she was when she died. In the last, those 2 months when she was sick, I was in the same city within, 10-minute drive, but didn't get to see her. And I got that phone call from my mom saying that she had just died. Maybe that's why, because I never did see her, and the information came from a phone. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be.
That's interesting, though.
It's very interesting. I'm really curious too, because other people have reported. That's why I was like almost looking for someone to have had a phone dream. I just haven't really ever come across that. And I've always wondered, as time goes on, if those phone dreams, like cordless or in the wall, change to cell phone dreams, because that's what we have now. And I haven't seen a cell phone dream yet.
Did she call you? Do you remember if she called you first or you call her first?
It's always her calling me.
That's interesting.
Because I'm just brainstorming here, but it seems like she created the distance in those last couple months. So she's calling from her end, from a distance. Yeah, that's interesting. Right? Because that's the safety.
That is interesting. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I wonder too.
I never thought about it that way.
Well, even we could pass cell phones, just go through Skype, because I'm guessing a lot of people have relationships with parents and loved ones through Skype, and I haven't seen any of those dreams. So, it's interesting, very interesting topic. And then for Lottie, have you ever dreamt of her calling you on the phone?
No, I don't remember her ever calling me on the
phone. Little rat phone.
I can speak.
I think she's happily living her afterlife, and she hasn't visited me. So I think she taught me what she needed to, and she's on her way.
That's cool. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Wow. All right. So anything else you want to say about your life or your taxidermy?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, all I know is that I have a big plan. I can't really say it yet, but I'm working on other projects related to pet aftercare and such. So stay tuned. That's all I can say for now.
When will this news be out?
I don't know. Hopefully within the next 2 years.
Okay.
I have a 2-year limit. I'm trying to get all this stuff figured out. So.
All right. So when you're done, so you have 2 years, come back on. Yeah. We'll talk about it then. So then.
That'd be awesome. I would love to.
And wonder. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has been a very fascinating conversation, and we obviously went on pretty long talking about the taxidermy stuff because it's just so interesting, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are appreciating this as well because it does tie into grief. It ties into remembering your pet loss because again, we do like to highlight that as a disenfranchised type of grief.
And opening people's eyes to how people mourn. I think it's very important because even for me, it's not something that you come across. So hopefully it raises awareness on that.
Sure. Yeah. And I love the thing that you were saying about the relics, because that's kind of how I look at a lot of my work, even like just the paw preservation. If somebody just wants the paw of their cat returned, I feel like that is in its way like a saint's relic. It's a direct line to that deceased loved one on the other side.
Yeah, that humans have a long history, and for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, we've in some way or another tried to have some sort of connection with death and also our loved ones that end up dying. And this is just a continuation of that. It's something that, again, if that is something that someone is comfortable with wrapping their head around, then it could be encouraging for them to kind of go and help them deal with their grief and loss that they're dealing with, because I imagine people come see you are people who love their pets tremendously.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
And so before we wrap up, the last question we always like to say is, if you could have a dream tonight of anyone who has died, what would that dream look like to you?
If I could have any dream tonight, it would be for my Oma to tell me where she is and what it's like to die. I think that's what I would really like, is just to know what that experience is like so that I can go into it with, I guess, some kind of expectation, or maybe possibly less fear, because I grasp to this earth and I'm so scared of letting go of my identity, and to talk to somebody who's actually died. And, if they would have a way to explain that whole process, I think that would give me a lot of solace.
I hope you have sort of that dream and that reassurance that there's more, almost, right? And
yeah. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of mystery out there, that's for sure.
All right. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing, being so open, and just talking about your life. I got to say, I really enjoyed it. Some people think it would be weird, but hey, this is who we are.
Everyone else thinks it's just as interesting. It's fine.
So yeah, thank you for being you and following your dreams and following the passion, because hopefully that can give other people not only the inspiration to do things that a lot of people are telling them not to do, but that there's something in you that knows what's right, and you left certain jobs to find that, and you found it. And I love that about you, that you follow your heart and you work from your heart. It's not about all the other stuff that business can be about. So thank you for being you.
Of course. Well, thank you. I'm so honored to be a part of this, and thank you so much for your insight on my grief dream.
Also, so where can people find you? So now that people love you, where can they find you and follow you?
Well, you guys, Instagram is probably where I'm most active. It's just at Precious Creature, one creature. And I post there. I try to post at least a couple times a week. But, I try to stay off the internet as much as possible. It's not really good for my head.
And then what's your website?
My website is www.preciouscreaturetaxidermy.com.
Wonderful. Lauren. It's a real pleasure to speak with you. And again, like Joshua said, talked about a lot of different things and how you pushed forward into doing what you do and love. So we're just going to shout out our platform at griefdreams.ca for more information on the topic. We added a donation button, and there are perks to those who donate. If you have Facebook, you can join the Grief Dreams group. You can share your dreams or hear more dreams of others. We are on Twitter and Instagram at Grief Dreams, and our other page at the Grief Dreams podcast. And as always, we like to end the podcast with love and gratitude from us to you.
I have questions. I have introduced myself. You have introduced yourself. This is a very good conversation.